Hi, I'm Chike Coleman, that's Sanford Hess, and this is another edition of Real Reviews Home Edition, the show where we talk about movies from our homes. This week, it's another Halloween edition of our show, where we'll be covering two horror comedies of sorts. Uh, the first being American Werewolf in London, the second being the 2000 and I think 17 movie, The Babysitter. Um, and here's the thing. I'm not a really big fan of horror movies. Sanford knows this. I hate getting scared. I hate random noises. But because we're in the month of Halloween, I've got to suck it up. So to tell you about the first film that we're going to be discussing, Sanford's going to give you his thoughts and the premise of An American Werewolf in London. Sanford?
First of all, does my audio sound okay?
Yeah, your audio is good.
All right, good. So, American Werewolf in London came out around 1981, and I gotta say, this movie. This is one of those movies that I went through a phase where I wasn't really into horror either. I went through a phase in my teenage years where we watched stupid horror movies and just to laugh at them. And then I went through a phase for a long time where I wasn't really into horror, and then later in life, I've gotten big on horror. So this was a movie that I always saw in the video store when back in the days when we go to video stores to choose a movie to watch. And I always remember being kind of scared, but kind of interested by this movie. So I was excited to finally have the chance to watch it. So An American Werewolf in London takes place in England. And the movie starts with two friends who are David and Jack, who are American backpackers in the moors of England. We're not really sure exactly where it is. And they come across, they're in a sort of rural area and they come across a bar or a pub and they go in there. And of course, there's the moment where the music stops and everyone stares at them. And they kind of have a moment to play it off. But of course, they have to ask about the pentagram on the wall, which point everybody shuts up. And then basically they feel uncomfortable and leave. And someone tells them, beware the moon. Well, it turns out that was good advice because they are attacked by a werewolf. Now, the werewolf, true werewolf form, kills Jack, but David is only wounded. And the important thing about that, of course, is that if you are wounded by a werewolf, you will also become a werewolf. So David is then transported, and the next scene, we are there in the hospital, and David has been brought to the hospital, and he is recovering from his wounds, which are bad. And the next phase of the movie happens while he's in the hospital. Now, he does start to improve, and he develops a bit of a relationship with a nurse, but also he begins to see visions. And the main vision that he sees is his friend Jack, who has come to tell him that because Jack, was killed by the werewolf, but the bloodline of the werewolf still exists, that he is therefore stuck in a kind of halfway place between living and dead. Now, he is visited by Jack several times, and in one of my favorite parts of the movie, Jack becomes more and more visibly decomposed with each visit, which is kind of a really interesting shock twist on the horror. I like the scenes with him and Jack, by the way. I thought that was one of the best parts. They have a good interplay, and the fact that Jack is dead and kind of saying, hey, dude, you should kill yourself. You should kill yourself. He warns him that he's I should mention, Jack warned David that he's a werewolf now, and he's going to turn into a werewolf the next full moon. Well, David is released from the hospital, winds up staying with the nurse. The full moon comes around, and wouldn't you know it, David turns into a werewolf. He then goes on a killing spree, which he only learns about the next day when he wakes up in the London Zoo among the wolves and has to go home. Well, the movie comes to a climax on the second night of the full moon as David is again going to turn. He's again visited by Jack, although now he's also visited, and again, I like this scene a lot, by the people he had killed the prior night who are now also stuck in the limbo. And what happens, though, I got to say, the movie ends on a kind of a crash bang note. John Landis, who directed this movie, also directed The Blues Brothers. And the last scene of this movie kind of reminded me of the last scene of the Blues Brothers in a little bit, in the way of having all these massive car accidents and everything's going on. But basically, David, the werewolf, is killed. And the movie ends, which was one of my dissatisfactions with it, because they kind of teed up this good idea of these people are trapped in this limbo. They need it to be released. But then when the movie just ended with him dying, I felt a little unfulfilled on that. So, Chike, had you seen this movie before?
I had not.
All right, tell me what you thought about this movie.
Okay, so I'm going to put on my film criticism hat a little bit here.
I love it when you do that.
Fear is something we all experience. But what is fear really but a physical reflex within us anytime we see something that is unpleasant or unfamiliar to us? I had that feeling multiple times throughout this movie because I was just grossed out by the transformation scene, which, by the way, as much credit as we give the directors for directing horror well and building the tension well, skip that, screw that entirely. Because the real winner of this entire movie is Stan Winston, the makeup artist behind the werewolf effects. He would go on to help Michael Jackson with the Thriller effects for the music video Thriller, which amazing work there as well. He is the real MVP of this movie. Yeah, John Landis can create tension with the way he moves the camera, with how he shocks, with how Jack shows up?
Yeah.
Jack shows up decomposing all the time. But I really love the pace this movie went at. It didn't rush it. It didn't overly draw it out either. It just let things happen naturally. And that's what I really loved about this film. That's what makes it fearful for me. That's what I think modern horror movies have essentially lost. They don't know how to draw things out. They know how to make a jump scare, but they don't know how to make you consistently feel the fear. And then when you least expect it, hit you with it. Just at random. And I think that's where the success of this movie comes in.
I'm going to agree with you. I think that one of the key aspects, to me, it's, filmmaking, it's even better. It's more impressive because the makeup effects, although they were pretty cutting edge for the time, they look a little dated now. And I think where John Landis does such a great job is he creates all that suspense by not showing the werewolf. There are first-person shots where we're kind of seeing what the werewolf would see.
I'm thinking about the tube kill when you say that.
Yeah, there are reaction shots. There's people running and being chased, but we don't really see the monster. And I think, that's to its strength. And we're going to contrast that when we get to the Babysitter in a moment. It's to its strength that your mind fills in what's not shown, and your mind can almost create it scarier than anything that they could have shown on the screen using the technology at the time. Same
thing with a movie like John Carpenter's The Thing. You really don't see the creepy, crazy monster all that much. You see it shifting and contorting a few times, but it's not enough for you to create them, for the image to be mentally created for you. You're creating what you think that thing looks like. And by the time you actually do see it, it's massively more horrifying than you ever possibly imagined. And then you lose sleep that night because you're just like, I don't want that thing anywhere near me.
Yeah. So it's old school filmmaking. It is, and what a segue maybe to transition to The Babysitter, because I think in a lot of ways these two movies couldn't be more different in the way that they approach the horror genre. So do you want to talk about The Babysitter?
I want to ask first, would you recommend An American Werewolf in London?
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think parts of it are pretty dated. Where I think the strength of it is, like you mentioned, the horror comedy aspect. I thought that the comedic thread kind of stayed there for a lot of, throughout most of the movie. But this movie is a horror movie. It's a little more upsetting and horrifying than I sort of expected. And and again, I referenced the kind of crash bang ending. I wasn't really crazy about all the extra people being killed in this sort of final scene with the car accidents and stuff like that.
I agree.
I felt like that was way gratuitous.
Yeah, a bit excessive.
Yeah, but yeah, I would recommend this movie. It's kind of a classic. It's a somewhat of a and it's certainly a well-known one for sure.
Yeah, I would recommend it as well. Now, I'm going to contrast that with how I feel about The Babysitter. The Babysitter came out in 2017. I'm not even going to bother telling you who it stars because the only person I can remember is Samara Weaving, and I know that Bella Thorne is also in the movie. Why those names stick out to me is because Samara Weaving was in the movie Ready or Not, and Bella Thorne is a Disney Channel star. The other actors and actresses, including the leads, are complete unknowns. So remembering their names is a struggle for me.
Well, it's, even the title of the movie gives it away because they're really known by their cliches. The babysitter, the jock, the cheerleader, etc.
Yeah. So the premise is this. Parents are going to go out and have some fun for the night, so they invite over this babysitter to spend some time with, I believe his name is Cole.
Yes.
Cole. And Cole, being the 12 or 13-year-old he is, puberty's hitting him, but he's attracted to the babysitter, but he's more curious about her than anything. And the babysitter brings over her friends and a nerd, and they're all talking and hanging out, having a good old time, until it's revealed when he's spying on them that the babysitter kills the nerd as a form of a demonic sacrifice.
Just pause on that for a second.
From then on, you see Cole, who basically was supposed to be tricked into drinking alcohol so he could be out like a light, so that they could take his blood for also the opportunity to be a part of the demonic sacrifice, is wise to the plan that he's basically dead meat unless he does something. Along the way, we've already seen Cole deal with a few challenges. There's a school bully that he gets picked on by continuously that he needs to stand up to. There's a girl that he kind of wants to be friends with, but doesn't really know what to do about that scenario either. And he's kind of forced into both situations throughout the film, while trying to escape these high school teenagers trying to kill him to gain immortality and everlasting power. Now, as cheesy as that sounds, it's Home Alone with gore. With lots of gore.
Lots of gore.
Extensive amounts of gore.
Excessive gore.
And this film was directed by McG, same guy who directed Charlie's Angels and Charlie's Angels Full Throttle. So you know that the excessiveness has a point to thrill the director's ego. This movie is not horrible. It's just below horrible. Mostly because you believe in what Cole is trying to do to better himself. And see, that's the thing that I was mentioning last week about Enola Holmes. You really don't get growth from that character. From this character, even though it's a ridiculous, odd, crazy situation, there's all kinds of growth going on in his self-respect of himself, and how he deals with confrontation, and how he matures enough to be able to talk back to the babysitter and be like, heck no, I'm not letting you do this to me. Heck no, I'm not letting you do this to my friend. And if nobody will believe me, I'm going to prove that I'm the responsible adult, that I'm wiser and older than you think I am. And he does that sequentially throughout the movie. And ultimately, that plus the crazy, ridiculous kills are the reason why I kind of begrudgingly like The Babysitter, because even though Samara Weaving is really the star that the movie focuses on, and she does great in her role, the guy who plays Cole and how Cole evolves as a person really works here, in my opinion, and makes it maybe not a classic horror movie, but a begrudgingly fun watch. Sanford, what did you think of The Babysitter?
I'm going to go with you on the begrudgingly fun watch. I mean, it's good escapism. And I'm going to praise a couple of the more technical aspects in the movie for a second. This movie has style, right?
Yeah.
McGee is a director who gives you a certain, he came from this music video world. He has a real look and feel to his movies. This movie is flashbang style from the moment it starts to the moment it's over. And actually, one thing that I found in both movies, they had a lot of that kind of first-person camera work. Except in this one, a lot of it is the camera facing on Cole. I guess he was wearing some kind of a getup where the camera was there, and you're sort of running around with him. But it was crazy. It was stylish. It was cool looking. The colors were cool. The characters were out there. And the other thing I'm going to say and positive about this movie, it does not have a wasted moment.
Yeah, no.
I mean, everything that happens early in the movie turns out to have a purpose later in the movie. And, the movie goes zipping along from one scene to another, and yet it seems whole. It seems complete. It's well formed. It gets the entire story across in like a crisp 90 minutes. So, if you're into comedy, horror, escapism, this is a good execution of that, no pun intended. And I will say my personal favorite scene was when he's fighting with who is the jock. And they kind of have this moment where the jock pushes him out to confront the bully. Even though the jock is trying to kill him, he takes the moment to sort of, give him some self-confidence and send him out. I thought that was a really wonderful scene. I just really like that.
Even though it massively failed?
Even though especially because it massively failed. It reminds me of the one fight I was in as a kid where I thought I was going to go and stand up to the bully and stuff like that. And I got hit in the face and my nose was bleeding. And, that's how fights are sometimes. You think you're going to do it and then you don't.
And I think that's another interesting point you bring about this movie. There's an earnestness to it that you wouldn't expect from a horror movie, especially one involving a kid who is going through puberty while escaping mad killer high schoolers. There's an earnestness to it that makes you want the kid to succeed in the same way we all wanted Macaulay Culkin to succeed against the people robbing his house.
Yeah, that must have been one of the ways they pitched it, was the Home Alone horror movie. So I do have one frustration, I got to say, because they, like you said, they referenced him as being 12 years old. But I got news for you. That actor ain't 12. And furthermore, the idea that near the end he gets in a car to drive it, I would have bought this more if they had just kind of said he was 14 or something. There were just a few little inconsistencies like that. They just tend to irritate me because I see them as sloppy script writing. So, another thing that irritated me about this was that he and his babysitter seemed to have this multi-year relationship of, closeness and inside jokes. But, she had apparently just moved there in order to find a new victim for a sacrifice. So she was really putting in a lot of investment of time to find a sacrifice victim,
Well, I will say this. There's a sequel, and that exact point you made kind of gets reflected in the sequel.
Oh, maybe I have to watch the sequel, although not for the show.
I would advise you don't.
Okay. Maybe I'll
I would advise you don't, because that sequel is problematic to me on so many levels.
As sequels often are.
And the thing is, there's a distinction between this and the sequel. The original film was written by the original writer with McGee directing. McGee wrote the sequel, which is a recycle of the movie we are now reviewing. And without going into too much detail, the young friend that he makes friends with predictably becomes super attractive, but
And
is not at all interested in him, even though he's interested in her.
got
And
it.
there's a bit of a twist that even I was like, oh God, really? So if you like the Babysitter movie because of its kills and because of its earnestness, then yeah, I highly recommend it. Watch it as many times as you want every Halloween. It's a great Halloween movie tradition if you want that. But if gross out horror, cheap laughs, and earnestness is not your thing, maybe watch American Werewolf in London. I would say that's a good trade off.
Yeah.
Or Alien.
Yeah. Or go for a more classic horror movie or whatever.
Yeah, whatever you want to do. Because I find the Babysitter begrudgingly able to recommend because it's fun, it knows its pace, it stays on pace, and you can't really predict what's going to happen after it's revealed that these high school students are off to kill this kid. You can't know what resources he's going to have at any given moment, because whereas in Home Alone everything was drawn out for you, what will happen, this has none of that. It's a thinking on the fly type thing that I think a lot of people will gravitate toward.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for that reason, I recommend it. Sanford, what do you think?
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun movie. Like I said, it's stylish. And, if you're looking for a horror movie, a new horror movie, it's only been out for a couple of years and it wasn't on my radar when it first came out. I think it's a good choice to sit back and have. I wouldn't necessarily eat popcorn while I ate it, so while I watched it, but it's a good movie to get in the spirit of the Halloween time.
Okay. Next week, we'll have something decidedly different to discuss. Um, don't know what that's going to be yet. We'll be nearing toward the end of October, so I have not yet decided whether we'll stay on the horror grind or go someplace completely different. But I have an idea. Um, and until then, I'm Chike Coleman, and that's Sanford Hess. We will see you next week. Bye, guys.